He was a dangerous repeat offender who had just committed a brutal murder. So why did he specifically ask for me, a lawyer who had never handled a criminal case in his life? My name is Lewis. I was a junior lawyer handling basic civil cases. One morning, I got a call from the county jail. Arthur Sterling, a man who had just brutally murdered his own brother, refused to speak to anyone but me. I thought it was a joke. I tried to refuse. But Arthur insisted. I looked into the case files. It was an open and shut case. The victim was David Sterling, a handsome, successful university professor. He was found strangled in his own bed. The evidence against his younger brother, Arthur, was irrefutable. DNA, fingerprints, and security footage all pointed to him. Arthur's criminal record was even more chilling. 15 years ago, when he was just 16, Arthur was convicted of the brutal assault and murder of an 18-year-old girl named Chloe. He served 13 years and had only been out on parole for 2. Now, he had killed his own flesh and blood. I went to the jail, fully intending to reject him to his face. Arthur was tall and gaunt, in his early 30s, with dark circles under his eyes, but his gaze was terrifyingly calm. I asked him why he wanted me. He looked at me and said, "Lawyer Lewis, if you take my case, I will confess the real truth to you. And I promise, you won't lose." Despite my disgust, my curiosity won. I took the case and dug deeper. The police theory was simple: jealousy and greed. David was the golden child, rich and successful. Arthur was a high school dropout and a convict. Arthur had moved into David's house, began stalking David's beautiful fiancée until she left him, and then murdered David to steal his inheritance. The brothers had an elderly father, Mr. Sterling, a wealthy former headmaster who was currently dying of terminal cancer in the hospital. The police believed Arthur murdered David so that he would be the sole heir to the family fortune when the old man died. It was a cold, calculated, evil motive. But something didn't add up. I tracked down Arthur's old neighbors from when he was first released from prison. They didn't describe a monster. They described a quiet, polite man who carried groceries for an elderly couple across the hall. The elderly woman, Mrs. Miller, told me, "Arthur is a good boy. He used to sit outside my door and make sure my sick husband was safe." I went to the hospital to speak to the dying father, Mr. Sterling. I expected a grieving parent. Instead, I found a man consumed by absolute hatred. When I mentioned Arthur, the old man's face twisted in rage. "Don't talk to me about that beast," he rasped. "I just want to know when they are going to execute him." With trial approaching, the district attorney offered no deals. Death penalty was on the table. I visited Arthur one last time and told him the truth: "You have no defense. Your father hates you. You are going to get the electric chair." Arthur just smiled faintly. "Good. Tell my father I know the truth. Tell him he has one day to write his will, or I will speak in open court." I was confused. "What truth?" I asked. Arthur looked down at his scarred hands. "Lawyer Lewis, I'm going to tell you a story about a family. A family obsessed with legacy. Growing up, I was the invisible child," Arthur said. "David was the genius, the star athlete, bound for the Ivy League. My father worshipped him. I was just a disappointment. By the time I was 15, my parents essentially ignored my existence. I spent my nights wandering the dark streets of our suburb, just to stay out of their way. One night, I was walking near the woods and heard a scream. I ran in and saw a drunk man attacking a girl. I fought him off. The girl was crying, her clothes torn. I gave her my jacket and walked her home. I found out later her name was Chloe. She was my brother David's classmate. Chloe's parents came to our house to thank me. That was how Chloe and David officially met. They were a perfect match. Both smart, both beautiful. Soon, they were high school sweethearts. I never minded. I knew a girl like that would never look at a ghost like me. I was just happy she was safe. A year later, it was graduation night. David had just received his acceptance letter to Harvard. My parents were ecstatic. But that night, David didn't come home until 2 a.m. When he walked in, he was covered in mud and blood. He collapsed on the floor, sobbing. David confessed everything to my parents. He had walked Chloe home. He tried to pressure her to sleep with him. When she refused, his ego shattered. He beat her, assaulted her, and strangled her to death in the woods. He had buried her body in the mud. My father went pale. His golden child, his legacy, was about to be locked in a cage for life. My father looked at David, and then, he looked at me. He pulled me into the kitchen and made the ultimate proposition. My father said, "Arthur, you have no future. You're failing school. But your brother is going to change the world. If he goes to prison, this family is ruined. But you're only 16. You're a minor. If you confess to the crime, you'll only serve 10 or 15 years. Our family survives. We will take care of you forever." I didn't care about my life anyway. So, I agreed. My father coached me on what to say. He scratched my hands to make it look like I pulled the rope. The next morning, I walked into the police station and confessed to a brutal murder I didn't commit. I sat in the jail visiting room, completely paralyzed. You took the fall for your brother?" I whispered. Arthur nodded. "I spent 13 years in a concrete box. I didn't care. But when I got out, I realized my father never paid a dime of civil compensation to Chloe's grieving parents. He kept all his money. I tracked down Chloe's parents," Arthur continued. They had moved to the city, living in poverty. Her father's kidneys were failing. He needed a $400,000 transplant, and they had nothing. They were the elderly couple I carried groceries for. I lived across the hall from them for a year, using a fake name. They were so kind to me, never knowing I was the monster who supposedly killed their little girl. One night, I met my brother David for a drink. He was drunk, crying about the guilt. He told me something that broke my mind. He said that on the night he killed Chloe, as he was strangling her, she kept looking at the trees, crying out my name. "Arthur, save me. Arthur, please." She waited for the boy who saved her a year ago to save her again. I snapped, Arthur said, his eyes welling with tears. I couldn't just watch anymore. I had to fix it. I moved into David's house. I drove his fiancée away so she wouldn't get caught in the crossfire. And then, I killed him. I killed the golden child. But why? I asked, my voice shaking. Why ruin your life again? Because of the law, Arthur smiled grimly. If I killed David, all of David's millions would legally default to our father. My father is dying. He needs to write a will. Go to the hospital, Lawyer Lewis, Arthur ordered. Tell my father that if he doesn't write a will leaving every single penny of his and David's fortune to Chloe's parents, I will take the stand tomorrow. I will tell the jury what really happened 15 years ago. The police will test the old DNA. His precious family legacy will be destroyed, remembered only as murderers and cowards. I ran to the hospital. I delivered the message. The dying father looked at me with eyes full of absolute terror. He realized his throwaway son had checkmated him. With shaking hands, the old man dictated a will to me, leaving millions of dollars to the parents of the girl his favorite son had murdered. The next day in court, Arthur Sterling refused to speak. He didn't defend himself. He let the judge sentence him to death without a single word of protest. He traded his life to buy justice for a girl he couldn't save, and a kidney transplant for the father she left behind. Months later, I attended Chloe's grave with her elderly mother, Mrs. Miller. Thanks to the anonymous inheritance they received, her husband had gotten his transplant. He was going to live. I looked at the headstone. Tied to the marble cross was a light blue hair tie. The exact same kind Chloe wore the night Arthur saved her all those years ago. Mrs. Miller looked at me and smiled gently. "My eyes are bad," she said, "but I'm not blind." I knew who the boy living across the hall was. He was a good boy. Arthur Sterling was executed a year later. The world remembered him as a monster. But I will always remember him as the boy in the dark, who finally stepped into the light to balance the scales of justice.
Thank you for listening to today's narrative. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button right now. It's the best way to help the channel grow. To never miss a release, subscribe to the Fiction feed and turn on notifications. See ya!